Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by LastPass. LastPass is an award-winning security solution that helps millions of individuals in over 70,000 organizations navigate their online lives easily and securely. Businesses can maximize productivity while still maintaining effortless, strong security with LastPass. LastPass can minimize risk and give your IT team a breakthrough integrated single sign-on, password management, and multi-factor authentication solution. Cryptojacking from Hanoi. Dormant networks rise again for no easily discernible reason, but it doesn't look good. A gang is hitting German victims with the Gootkit banking Trojan and sometimes mixing it up with a REvil ransomware payload. Conti ransomware hits an IoT chipmaker. SCOTUS reviews the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. A few predictions for 2021. Yelin on Congress passing an IoT security bill. Our guest is Stephen Harvey from BitSight, who's tracking the correlation between companies with strong cybersecurity and financial success. And it may be back to school tomorrow in Baltimore County. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. Vietnamese threat actors have returned to the news. Over the long weekend, Trend Micro researchers described a recently discovered macOS backdoor they believe is associated with Hanoi's Ocean Lotus Group. And the Microsoft 365 Defender Threat Intelligence team has found the group they track with Redmond's customary metallic name as Bismuth, and which they associate with Ocean Lotus, APT-32, actively deploying a Monero miner against its victims. The development is interesting. North Korea's Lazarus Group has long been an outlier among state-directed threat actors in that financial gain was a major objective. It appears that Vietnam's services may be headed down the same path. Spam House has found a suspicious awakening. 52 dormant networks based in North America suddenly became active over the period of only a few days. All are physically hosted in Greater New York. While inactive networks do come back to life from time to time, the researchers find it suspicious that so many should reemerge essentially simultaneously without having any obvious mutual connections. Each of the revenant networks was announced by a different autonomous system number, a different ASN, and those ASNs are themselves revenants, silent for some time. Spam House isn't certain what's going on, but it doesn't look good, and it advises all to be wary of these no longer quiescent networks. A significant criminal campaign is underway against German internet users. Malwarebytes finds the campaign unusual in that the criminals are serving either the Gootkit banking Trojan or REvil, also known as Sodinokibi ransomware. As is typical, in this case, an infection begins with phishing. The payload is usually Gootkit, but they've observed a smaller number of REvil infections. Malwarebytes explains, quote, "The threat actors behind this campaign are using a very clever loader that performs a number of steps to evade detection. Given that the payload is stored within the registry under a randomly named key, many security products will not be able to detect and remove it. However, the biggest surprise here is to see this loader serve REvil ransomware in some instances. We were able to reproduce this flow in our lab once, but most of the time we saw a Gootkit." End quote. Industrial Internet of Things chipmaker Advantech has confirmed reports by Bleeping Computer and others that Advantech has been the victim of ransomware. The strain is Conti, and the criminals stole data that Advantech describes as confidential but low value. The attackers appear to have delivered their ransom demand on November 21st. They began leaking data on November 26th. The criminals are making a big ask. They want Advantech to pay them 750 Bitcoin, or about $12,600,000 US. If they're paid, they say they'll decrypt all affected data and remove any data they've stolen from their servers. says they. The hoods aren't necessarily promise keepers. Advantech says it's largely restored its operations, but we've not heard what their plans are with respect to the ransom demand. The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday heard arguments in a case challenging broad interpretation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. At issue in the case, Van Buren v. United States is, as SCOTUS blog puts it, quote, whether a person who is authorized to access information on a computer for certain purposes violates Section 1030A2 of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act if he accesses the same information for an improper purpose, end quote. These deliberations take time, but the Wall Street Journal says a decision is likely to come in June. Netrix has offered some predictions for 2021, most of which represent reasonable extrapolations of trends that have developed over 2020. The increase of ransomware, a shift in criminals' interest toward service providers, cloud misconfigurations will account for a significant fraction of data breaches, regulatory compliance and insurance combining to drive organizations toward best practices, and pandemic-induced changes in the workplace will have a delayed effect on security. Two of their predictions strike us as being at least as normative as they are predictive. Organizations will be driven by calculations of risk and value in managing their cybersecurity posture and investment. Digital Shadows also foresees more aggressive extortion by criminals, but they add a prediction that distributed denial-of-service attacks will be used more often to hold organizations for ransom. Blind spots that accompany the shift toward remote work will be exploited in social engineering, and the social engineers' lures will continue to dangle fishbait cut from current events to lure the unwary. Criminal markets will continue to thrive and to behave like markets, even as law enforcement seeks to crack down on them. Both the cops and the criminals will enjoy some success, that is, and if you bet on form, that seems about right. And finally, sorry kids, it's back to Zoom for you, at least if you're up there in Baltimore County. The Baltimore Sun reports that Baltimore County Public Schools expect to be sufficiently recovered from the ransomware attack they sustained last week to be able to resume instruction tomorrow. The school district has been tight-lipped about details, but they indicate that they have a process in place for bringing the students and teachers back online. The ransom demand is unknown, but it's believed likely to be high. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, securing modern business with cloud-native network detection and response. The massive shift to remote work has turned the reality of work on its head. With cloud and multi-cloud adoption, comprehensive visibility is more important than ever. But in order to protect your business, you need more than unified visibility. You need intelligence response workflows so teams can collaborate easily and act quickly. ExtraHop helps organizations like Wizards of the Coast detect threats up to 95% faster. As John Kreese, senior IT engineer, puts it, quote, ExtraHop is helping us accelerate cloud adoption by ensuring our workloads are secure. See how it works in the full product demo, free and no forms required, at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. I suppose that if I make the claim that companies with good cybersecurity practices are generally more successful overall, with correlated financial success, you'd likely respond with, yeah, that makes sense. Stephen Harvey is CEO at security ratings firm BitSight, and his team has been exploring that very issue to see how much of a correlation, if any, there is between well-performing companies with strong cybersecurity and financial success.
The step we've taken, and we announced this about 2 weeks ago, was to actually work with an index provider, a company called Solactive, which is one of the leading index providers. They're based out of Germany, to create a series of indices in which they took out the low-performing BitSight rated companies and focused the index on high-performing BitSight rated companies. And what they came back with was really exciting. It was a demonstration, an empirical demonstration that when you look back over time, the value of highly rated companies from a cybersecurity perspective outperform from a valuation the market. So the indices that they created outperform the benchmarks by anywhere from 1.5% to 7%. And 7% in finance is a huge outperformance.
There's that old saying that, correlation is not causation. So how do you weigh in, the various factors that may be responsible for these companies outperforming their peers?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's a combination of things, Dave. One is obviously a company with a high cybersecurity rating is going to have less breaches. There's a huge multiplier effect when you look at low-rated companies in terms of the amount of breaches that they are likely to have, and that does correlate directly to potential value. Another area that is getting the attention of directors is the notion that cybersecurity is another component of governance. And as you look at the governance standards of a company, that cybersecurity is one of the key pillars that should be assessed as part of that review. And what we're seeing actually is a very high demand at the moment from boards to hire CISOs directly to the board or to start creating a subcommittee focused on cybersecurity because of the meaningful impact of cybersecurity to the company, but also because of this trend towards governance.
What are your recommendations for folks who want to explore this, who want to find out how this might apply to how they're approaching cybersecurity?
I would suggest people take a look at the indices that were rolled out. This was made public, and Solactive are actually now marketing these indices to investment managers with the idea that they're going to start investing in an index that's tilted towards companies that perform well from a cybersecurity background with a proven outperformance in the backtesting that Solactive have done. And I think that can be found on our website or Solactive's. So, this is really groundbreaking. And I use the word empirical. It's empirical evidence that there is a correlation here.
That's Stephen Harvey from BitSight. And now, a word from our sponsor, Verizon. Mitigate the risks and realize the benefits of digital transformation with the help of Verizon, a leader in cybersecurity managed and professional services for nearly 2 decades. From secure cloud computing solutions to advanced detection and response capabilities, Verizon helps secure data, networks, and infrastructure of many of the world's best-known organizations. Their annual Data Breach Investigations report is considered the gold standard of cybercrime research. And Verizon's leadership in network, wireless, and IoT connectivity makes it uniquely capable of protecting the ever-expanding attack surface. Let Verizon help you optimize your defenses and achieve the maximum return on your security investments. Learn more at verizonenterprise.com/products/security. And joining me once again is Ben Yelin. He's from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security, also my co-host on the Caveat podcast, which if you have not yet checked out, what are you waiting for? It's a good show.
It's a great show.
Ben, great to have you back. An interesting article from Cyberscoop. This is written by Tim Starks, and it's titled, "After Years of Work, Congress Passes Internet of Things Cybersecurity Bill, and It's Kind of a Big Deal." What's going on here, Ben?
It is kind of a big deal. I mean, first of all, it's a big deal when Congress passes anything. So,
right.
Let's
right, exactly.
Let's raise our glass to that.
Yeah, that's not what we sent them to Washington to do, is it?
No, they should be, puffing their chest at a high-profile congressional hearing about something insignificant, not actually doing things to address problems. I think we should be happy that they passed something in the first place, regardless of what it is. The substantive law is really interesting. It is a bill that sets a baseline for the Internet of Things. So these Internet-connected devices, that you have to have a baseline level of security in order to contract with the federal government. And the federal government kind of does this in a lot of different contexts to try and set minimal standards for federal contracting in hopes that companies, in trying to obtain these federal contracts, will adopt these practices more broadly. And they're also, as part of this law, going to encourage vulnerability disclosure policies so that organizations can work with expert security researchers to fix any software flaws that might arise. So the story of how this bill came into being enacted, it was a 3-year effort, started in 2017, ran into some opposition from the United States Chamber of Commerce because they thought this might be too much of a burden on particularly small businesses. And I don't know if you've heard, but the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has some sway in the United States Congress.
Sure.
But there were some enterprising lawmakers in both the House and the Senate. This was a bipartisan effort. They were able to neutralize the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to get them to not oppose the bill, even if they were directly supporting it. And a couple of legislators were able to get it across the finish line. The House passed its version in September, and the Senate just agreed to it by unanimous consent. And to talk about how bipartisan this is a bill that was drafted in part by Representative Robin Kelly, who is a very progressive Chicago Democrat, and was co-sponsored, at least in the last year or so, by Mark Meadows, who is now President Trump's chief of staff. And she was able, the two of them were able to work with one another to get this done. So this is sort of the rare cybersecurity policy victory that's certainly worthy of celebration.
So, is the general notion here that if we require this in government contracting, that it'll be in the company's best interest to have that sort of, sprinkled out throughout all of their products, that it'll make its way into the consumer and B2B space as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the federal government has done this with things like Energy Star ratings. You want to, encourage companies to produce things that are energy efficient. So you require, in all government contracting, that companies that want to work with the federal government institute those types of policies. And yeah, the idea is, you give them some incentive to adopt safer cybersecurity practices for IoT, then these are going to become more widely adopted, and it's going to have downstream effects for organizations that aren't interested in federal government contracts. So in some ways you could see this as a small step because it only applies in the relatively limited world of federal procurement, but I think it sort of trickles down into the industry the way it's done in other contexts.
How interesting that cybersecurity seems to consistently be one of the few areas that can get bipartisan support and actually move things through the process. These gears that are all full of sand right now in Congress, somehow these seem to make it through.
Yeah, I'm very cynical about these things. I always hope that lawmakers can make progress before things get polarized. If you have a really polarizing figure who comes out in support of something, that might lead the other side to be against it. So for the purpose of cybersecurity, it's kind of better for these things to happen under the radar, where it's not like there's a major push by President Trump to get this enacted into law, because that might engender some opposition among congressional Democrats.
Because it's him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and we all have those tendencies.
Sure.
If it's a person that we don't like proposing something, we're naturally going to want to oppose it.
Yeah.
So I think, what's been good about cybersecurity policy making is it has kind of gone under the radar. It's avoided some of these higher profile political battles that have ground Congress to a halt.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, Ben Yelin, again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Proofpoint's Observit, the leading people-centric insider threat management solution. Learn more at observit.com. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders who want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It'll save you time and keep you informed. We'll leave the light on for you. Listen for us on your Alexa smart speaker, too. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Puru Prakash, Stefan Vaziri, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yelin, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.